Yo, what is going on, guys? Jeff back here with yet more Project Zailas. We are clipping right along with the project here. The car is coming along great. I just wrapped up installing my airlift performance upgrade. I went from the V2 system up to the 3P, and I got the management computer pulled out, the old harness pulled out, everything reinstalled, the 3P harness, the 3P management. I also installed a second compressor in there. Everything went well. I'm very happy with it. The only thing left to do on that is run a calibration once the car has the wheels on it and everything. So now that that's all wrapped up, we're now ready to move on to the next part of this process, and that is cutting the fenders on my car. Now, this has been a long time coming. Of course, I had to complete the over fenders before I did this, and now that the over fenders are fully complete, I can now move on and actually get into cutting the fenders on my car. A little bit of a nerve-wracking thing, but that's okay. Like I've said many times, if you guys have been following my build, it's my car, you know, it's my build. I'm gonna do whatever I'm gonna do to it, whether it's pretty or ugly or whatever. It is what it is. It's got all kinds of character, and cutting the fenders is just, it's just all part of that whole process. So it's all right. I'm excited to get this done finally. It's got to get done, and I'm gonna do it right now. It's fairly simple. There's not much to it. It's basically just taking a tool like this, a high-speed cutoff blade, and cutting right through the sheet metal. The fronts are particularly easy because there's only a single sheet of sheet metal here. The blade will slice right through it, no problem. And that's all you pretty much have to do on the front. Just make sure you seal it up so it doesn't rust, because you do expose bare metal. In the back, things get a little more interesting in that there's actually two sheets of sheet metal comprising the quarter panel. You cut only the outside part of the quarter panel, the outside sheet, piece of sheet metal rather, and use the undersheet to fold up under and then refasten the undersheet to the shortened upper sheet. There's a reason there's two sheets of sheet metal in the back, and that's because it needs extra reinforcement, so you do have to make sure that you're reattaching those two pieces of sheet metal back together again. Now, most people use a welder to do this. They will actually weld the bottom sheet back up onto the top sheet, or the outer sheet rather, and unfortunately I don't have a welder with me, so I'm not going to be doing that right now. Of course, I am eventually going to be going back, revisiting it, and welding up what I do today, but for now I'm going to actually just be using a rivet method, where I'm going to rivet the bottom flaps into the outer sheet. I will show you that when we get to that point. And then I'm going to, of course, seal it all up with galvanizing spray, primer, and possibly a little epoxy. I also bought a little bit of a fender trim that I'm going to slide up on there so it's not real sharp metal. I'll tidy it up as much as I can, but I'm not going to be welding in this video. Hopefully very soon I will weld them all up and everything, and we'll be good. That is the plan anyways. So this isn't a very difficult procedure at all. This video shouldn't take a real long time. Definitely not as long as the air suspension video took. That was a longer video, and I'm sorry about that, but there was a lot of detail there. This is not nearly as detailed as that. So first thing you need to do, of course, is just go ahead and get rid of the fender liners here. I'm going to take that out because those obviously are not going to be fitting anymore up here. We're going to be cutting off a good amount of the metal, so this is not going to apply. However, you don't just want to throw them away. What we'll probably end up doing is just cut right about in this area right here, because we want to maintain as much protection in this area where there's still going to be metal to attach, or attachment points right down in the sides here. And then just this upper portion we're not going to need anymore. We may repurpose it. Come on now, let's get some focus going. We may repurpose this or repurpose it toward the front or something like that, but a good portion of this we're not going to need because it's not going to fit, obviously. Now, I've gone ahead and mocked up a line here that I'm going to be cutting out. I will more than likely need to be cutting more than this, but this is just my first line. And you can see this vertical line here is right where the inner fender well piece of my over fender comes in. I don't want to cut any more of that out right there if I don't have to, because that's where the over fender comes in right there. If I absolutely have to, if I find that the wheel is coming up and hitting right there, it's okay if I do have to cut in here just a little bit more, but I cannot cut into where the well nut is fastened right here, because that is of course a fastening point for my over fender. So if I have to, I'm probably just going to need to come in just a little bit more. This may work, it may not, I don't know. This, like I said, is just my first draft of my line. In here, I'm almost positive I'm going to need to expand this line down a little bit more, and it pains me to have to say that because that's going to be getting into my bumper. I'm going to have to start cutting into my bumper here. Probably just cut off the corner section right there, which unfortunately also cuts off a very critical mounting bolt that's right under this corner right here. And so I am going to have to find a way to drill in here or create another mounting bolt a little deeper in so that this corner isn't just kind of hanging out there. Fortunately, the over fender design does create a lot of support for the front bumper, with there being well nuts all the way down through this front portion of the fender here and down in through the bumper. So it's not like the bumper would be flapping in the wind or anything, but I am going to need to, or at least I'm going to want to, establish another little mounting point if I do have to cut into my bumper, which, as I said, I'm almost certain I will. I know for a fact the wheel's going to come up in here and we got to have this clear. But I just mocked up the line just for now. I know I'm going to be cutting at least that much off. Now with this over fender design, it does use the factory fender here as a lot of support. It lays right up on top of it, so I didn't want to cut off a whole bunch of this, like more than I needed to. I wanted to cut only as much as I absolutely needed to get as much travel as I want as I lower my car. I want to maintain as much of this fender as I can to allow the over fender enough support so it's not putting too much stress on the mounting points up on the top there. So let's go ahead and get started. After I remove the fender liner, I'm going to actually put the wheel on the car, and I'm going to use a jack to compress the wheel up into the wheel well, and then I'm going to adjust any lines that I see where it's clearly going to make contact with the wheel. I'll save myself the time and the headache of dropping the car off the jack stands and all that, and then realizing that I need to cut more. I'll just jack the wheel up and everything, and the whole strut and everything. I'll jack it up with the jack and see where there's any areas that are clearly going to need to be cut, and I'll adjust my line if necessary, and we should be good to go. Now for my tool, like I said, I'm using a high-speed cutoff blade, and I have multiple blades here. You want to make sure you're not just using one blade, because this thing will disintegrate and there's no way you'll get through all four corners of the car on just one blade. So I have a total of 5 blades here. That should get me through the entire process. Just make sure you have plenty of blades, and most importantly, when you're doing this, wear safety protection. Make sure you're wearing goggles. Ideally something to cover the entire face. A dust mask, if that's all you have, is fine. But make sure you're wearing goggles and something to cover your face, because you are cutting metal and this blade is spinning real fast, and you do not want anything flying up in your face or anything like that. Also wear long sleeves, but nothing dangly. You don't want anything getting caught in the blade. Just, you know, common sense stuff. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to know how to be safe when you're doing this kind of stuff. When you're using high-speed tools, especially blades and things like that, just take care of yourself. Also, a little bit of protection for the car, a little bit of precaution. I went ahead and covered up my windshield, at least this half of it, and then I'll cover the other side when we get over to that side. And I also covered about half of the hood up this way. Sparks are going to be flying as the wheel is spinning, so you don't want any sparks hitting your glass or hitting any of your paint over here. It's not going to do a lot of damage at all. The sparks, they burn out real quick, but you may see just some little bitty burn marks just in the areas that get hit with the most sparks, especially glass. You'll see little burn marks and stuff as it hits that. So just to be safe, I threw that up there. It may or may not make a big difference, but I did that anyway. So just protect yourself first of all, protect your car, and you should be good to go. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so with the tire raised up with the jack stand, we can clearly see that our initial line is going to be far insufficient from what we need to do. Again, like I said, up in the front here, this line here is going to come way too short. So I am definitely going to need to at least come into this corner here, probably by about 1.5 inches. I'm going to bring this line down here. About there. I'll add some more tape and just follow that line all the way down right there. In the back also, I'm thinking we are going to need to go a little bit deeper. Not as deep as the mounting point, thankfully, but I think I'm going to need to come down to just about 1 inch out of that. So I'll adjust that line right now. And that should be fine. And it shouldn't bother the extension on the over fender end too much. As long as it's mounted here real solid, it's not going to be a big deal at all. I may end up having to shave a little bit of that away too, just if the tire ends up hitting the over fender right there, which, yeah, well, it won't be too big of a deal, but we will see. I think that should be sufficient right there. We still have a good amount of metal there so that the mounting point is not going to be too weak at all. So we'll just end up cutting here. I'm going to add some more tape right there and expand that line, and we'll go ahead and start our cut. Alright, so you can see our disc has decreased in size by quite a bit. That's how it kind of disintegrates. But it's still going good. Alright, we've cut through a good portion of this. It should come off. There might be a couple of little hang pieces. Man, it's painful to cut through my bumper like that, but hey, gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, there's a couple more pieces I gotta get in a little deeper, and we should be good. Sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the bolt that's in here right now, and then I'm going to finish cutting this portion off right here. It's kind of re-welded itself because the plastic gets real hot and melts, but you can kind of tear this off. Alright, so we got the first piece cut off there without too much of an issue whatsoever. It got right through that sheet metal, no problem. Also right through the polyurethane bumper, of course, no problem at all. I'm now going to go ahead and put the wheel back on the car and raise it up, do the same exact thing, and check for clearance through the sides. I'm also going to get in the car and turn the wheel a couple of times and see if we get any rubbing on the bumper section in the front there and also in the back right here. We want to make sure it's completely clear. Alright, so we got the wheel back on and I've risen it up with the jack, and you can see we've got a nice amount of clearance, especially through the back. I am going to need to come in through the front and do just a little bit more trimming right through this area right here. I think we're good right here, but this right here is just a little too close for comfort right there. I think once I start turning the wheel and stuff like that, I'm going to have some rubbing issues. So I'm going to come in just a little bit deeper right there. Other than that, I think we're good. I think we've got enough travel. I don't think I'm going to need to cut any more up here, but of course we'll find out once we have the over fender and everything on the car. There will of course always be little adjustments to make as you go along, but it's just a process of trial and error. So far so good. I'm going to make that little trim right there, and then we're actually going to head to the back. Alright, so I've gone ahead and made my adjustments through the front here. I just expanded this out about another 1/4 inch. And then I sanded the whole thing down really well. I can actually run my finger across this without having to worry about getting any metal splinters or anything. I want a real nice clean finish. Even though you don't see this, I don't want it all jagged and messy looking. That's just not my style. I like things clean, even the things you can't see. It's just kind of how I roll. So we got this really nice and clean here, and then I'm actually going to be sealing that with zinc, a zinc spray, cold galvanizing spray, and then primer as well. And then I'm going to actually, depending on how much I have left, I'm going to apply a little bit of a fender trim. It's a little rubber fender trim just along this edge here, just to prevent any kind of chafing. If the tire comes up and happens to hit that metal right there, it will bump up against the rubber and not this bare metal. Just an extra safety measure, not necessarily something you have to do, but it's something that I'm going to do. But I think we're good for now. I'm satisfied with the front until we put the wheel on and we actually test it. We may have to make more adjustments as we go. But for now, I think we're good in the front. So let's head to the back and start the process back there. Alright, so in the back, as I was explaining, it's a slightly different process in that we have two skins here as opposed to one. We need to first cut this very bottom section out right here because it's real thick. I have my fenders rolled, so it's even thicker than it is from the factory. We got to make sure that we cut that out first so we're not contending with that as we get in through the sides. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a first cut along just the very bottom edge right here to cut out all that folded metal right there. And then we're going to go in and just cut the outer layer of the two skins, which will leave the under layer exposed. And then we're going to go ahead and fold that under layer up over the top layer after we've cut off as much as we want to cut off the top layer there for enough travel. We're then going to fasten the bottom layer and the top layer together. In this case, I'm going to use rivets, as you will see, instead of welding. Typically you want to weld the two pieces together, which I do plan on doing in the future. But for now I'm just going to rivet them together and then seal everything with galvanizing spray and primer so it won't rust for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel on here. We're going to do the exact same thing we did in the other side to determine how much we need to cut off here, especially through the sides. I'm going to get the wheel on, jack it up, and then lay up my tape right over the top. I'll take my Sharpie marker and cut off probably something about like this. It's going to be very easy to determine in the back, actually a lot easier than in the front because we don't have any turning radius to deal with. It's pretty much just vertical movement up and down in the back. So it'll be pretty much just as it is in the side, straight up vertically and over the top and straight down vertically. I may end up losing just a little bit of my back bumper here, same exact thing as we had to cut off in the front there, in the front bumper. Probably about an inch of my back bumper in the corner here, and then I'll just run a new bolt or something through here to make sure we're still real tight in the corner right there. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so with the tire raised up, we can see that we're not going to have to take too much at all off of this front section right here. We are, of course, going to bring the line up this way, give it a nice amount of room up this way, accounting for the curvature of the wheel coming up here. So we'll probably do something about like this. I would imagine at least 3 or 4 inches up on the quarter panel there. Then we'll come around a little bit more to take off in the back here. I definitely do need to take off that corner in the back bumper right here, unfortunately. I'm just going to go ahead and follow the line of the natural body line here and bring that around and then come down vertically right down here and take off just about 1.5 inches of the rear bumper corner right there and then just come straight down. That should get it done, so let's lay up our tape and make our line. Alright, so I've got a line that I'm satisfied with. I went ahead and made a couple of adjustments after I made the initial line just to be safe, and I brought the side lines out just a little bit more so that I'm absolutely sure that we'll have plenty of clearance here. So I'm going to go ahead and start the process of cutting this lower part off. Like I said, we got to get rid of all that folded metal there because that's not going to be any good once we get in there and start trying to fold that up. We don't want that real thick part right there. So we're going to cut that off first. Of course, we got to take the wheel off and all that. We'll take the jack out and we'll start the process. Alright, so we got the wheel off, got my tool, got my gloves on. I went ahead and switched out for a fresh blade here. I've got plenty of blades, so I figure I'll just use a fresh one on each corner. That should be just fine. Like I said, we're just going to take this very bottom portion off first, and then we'll go ahead and move on to take out this outer skin right here. We're looking to leave that inner skin and just take out the outer skin. So let's get started. Alright, so we got that bottom section cut off, and I'm going to show you a close-up here so you can see the multiple layers that this thing is comprised of. So you can see this is the outside layer here, and there's 3 layers, looks like at least 3 layers of sheet metal under there, because this was folded up. I had my fenders rolled, of course, so this was folded up and there was 3 layers of sheet metal we had to cut off. That way we don't have to contend with this when we go in through the top section and fold it up under. We didn't want to fold up all 3 of those layers, so we wanted to cut that off in advance. So we got that guy off. It took a little bit of work, but we got it. So now I'm going to go ahead and use a real light touch and just cut out along this black line that we marked here. You don't want to go in real deep. You just want to cut that outer layer, that outer skin there, so it leaves the bottom one exposed. Alright, so we got the top layer removed at this point. Wasn't too difficult at all. It's really nice because you got a pretty good solid gap, a good inch gap right here, so you don't run too much of a risk of going through. But this is the bottom layer that you don't want to cut into. You just want to have kind of a light touch. You don't have to have too light of a touch, but this is what you're looking for. Take this section off right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to end up putting relief cuts about every inch or so, several relief cuts along this entire piece right here, and then we're going to actually start hammering those up so that we can fold those up over the top skin here. And then I'm going to actually rivet each one of those little flaps into the top skin. Depending on how nice the seal is, I may or may not go in with a little bit of silicone or something to just fill in a little bit more. So we're making good progress. I'm going to go ahead and trim out just a little bit more of the edges here, and then I'll go ahead and make my relief cuts, and we'll start hammering that up and folding it over. Alright, we've got all of our relief cuts set in there. As you probably saw, I just used a pencil to go ahead and pre-mark the lines. You don't have to do that, but I tend to find that if you actually make the marks, you can get a little bit of a cleaner result as opposed to them being a whole bunch of different widths, you know. Anyways, we got all of our relief cuts set in there. Now, I noticed that I couldn't quite get in real deep enough with my high-speed cutoff wheel. So what I did is I just took my Dremel with a little fiberglass cutting blade on it, the little mini guy, and I just took that line up just a little bit more on each one. You want to pretty much get the line to the top of the cutting line right here, so that when they all fold up, you don't have like a bunch of metal that it has to fold up around. You want them to fold up pretty much directly on that cutting line right there. So get them up as high as you can. You don't need to go past the cutting line. In fact, you probably don't want to do that. Just go up to the cutting line right there. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take our little rubber mallet here, and I'm going to actually pound these out so we can close the gap here. We want to actually get these two pieces to sandwich together as much as we can, and I'm going to try and fold these pieces over the top. But before I do that, I'm going to actually clean up this outer edge right here with some sandpaper, just to help to make it a little smoother so it's not quite so messy, so when I go to fold them up there's not loose metal pieces and stuff in there. After we get it all cleaned up, then we'll go ahead and hammer those things up. Alright, so after having sanding down that outer edge there, I just went ahead and sprayed the whole thing down with some galvanizing spray right now. That's to just make sure that this entire edge is covered. When we fold this all up, there's not going to be any metal that is not coated underneath. So I went ahead and gave it a nice good shot. Waited for 15 minutes so it's dry to the touch, and we're now going to go ahead and use our hammer to start bending these up. Alright guys, so after having pounded these things out pretty good, this is about the result that you should be looking for. We've just folded those tabs up over the outer sheet metal here, and we got just an array of the folded tabs over the top. Now, it's going to be a little difficult to get these things to press up. You want to get them real close as you possibly can to making contact with that cut line on the outer sheet metal right there, so that you can tack those in. If you're doing this the way that I'm doing and not welding right away, you're going to want them up real close as you can, so you can put your rivets in there and it will hold real tight, so when you go in and do your welding, it's not going to move on you. So this is about what it should look like just after you get done hammering. It's going to take a little while for it to get to this point, and don't get frustrated with it. This is probably the most tedious part of this whole entire process, is getting this thing to conform out, because it is such a particular curve under here. It does not naturally want to fold out like that. It's going to want to fight you. You get one section up real tight and then the other section falls out. You get that section back in, and then the first section falls out. It's just one of those things where it just takes time. If you have a fender roller, that's going to help you tremendously. I actually do have a fender roller, so I did use my fender roller a little bit to go in here and roll this inner skin up a little bit here. It did help. But if you don't have one, you can still do this. Just make liberal use of your hammer, and I also used a pair of vice grips to kind of pull the tabs up as I was hitting them underneath, and that really helped a lot as well. So you want them up as close as you can get them, like I said. So now at this point, we're now going to go ahead and put in our rivets to tack these things on. And you can do this by yourself, but it is much, much easier if you have help to do this. You got one person holding the thing up there while you're doing your drilling and putting in your rivet there, as opposed to, you know, trying to hold it up and drill in by yourself. That's just an absolute nightmare. It's not impossible, but if at all possible to have help, make sure you get some help. In this case, my lovely wife has come to give me a hand with this, and with two people, it's no problem at all. It's quite an easy task. It takes a little bit of time to get through every one of them. I've actually got 17 tabs here that we got to do, but we're going to get through all of them. It's just a process of holding. We're going to put a pilot hole in there with an awl. I'm going to hammer a pilot hole in. We're going to drill it out, put the rivet in there, and use my rivet gun to put it into place. After we have all the rivets set in there, I'm going to just go ahead and cut off the outer part of the tabs here that we don't need, because we don't need all this excess metal there. We're going to cut it all off to the bare minimum. We're going to tack in our rivets fairly low in here, pretty much as low as we can possibly get them, because we don't want them to interfere with the over fender as it lays down on top here. So we're going to get the rivets real low and then cut off any of this excess metal. You'll see what I'm talking about once we get there. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get started on this side here, and my wife is going to be holding these up with a pair of pliers while I set in the pilot hole, do the drilling, and set in the rivets. Let's get started. Alright, so here we go. My wife is holding the first tab down. I'm just going to set in a pilot hole right in the center and fairly low, close to the cutting line. Not too close, because you want to make sure you get penetration through both layers there. I'm going to go ahead and set in the pilot hole here. Doesn't have to be too deep, just as long as you got a solid hole there. I'm now going to go in with a drill and set in my hole. He's still holding that tab. I'm going to go right in with my first rivet. Put it right through that hole right there. I'm using this rivet gun right here. It's just a standard rivet gun, no frills. Usually takes about 3 good presses. There we go. She can release now with the pliers. A pair of vice grips. And there you go, we got our first rivet in there. That's what it should look like. And I just take my hammer, just like that. We're going to keep on moving along this way. Same exact process. She'll be holding it with the pliers while I put my pilot hole in there. We'll drill it out, put the rivet in. So it's just rinse and repeat. So we're going to go ahead and get through about half of these, and I'll show you guys what the first half looks like completed. Hey. Alright guys, so we are officially half done. I'm going to give you a little close up here. You can just zoom in so my shadow doesn't get in the way. So this is what you want right here. This is what you're looking for. Get those rivets nice and low, real close to the cut line there, but not so far down that it's actually going to miss the outer sheet. You want to make sure you're getting full penetration through both sheets of sheet metal and a nice round hole there. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Underneath here you can see how I've taken my hammer. As we've been going along, we've been pulling that up and hammering while we're pulling up, and that really helps. It's super effective. So you can see how tight we got that up in there, just with all the hammering and all that. It's kind of like doing metalworking for making armor and stuff like that. My hammer also, I will note, I'm using a hammer with one standard end like that, and the other end has a ball on it, and that ball has been tremendously helpful for getting up into that round, into the round recesses and stuff like that. So probably not absolutely necessary, but it really has helped. I wasn't even expecting to be using that, but I've used it a lot. So if you got one like that, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So we're half done at this point. As you can see, we've got still these guys to do right here, which are going to be very, very simple. The tabs in the back here tend to be a lot easier. They get along with the top sheet here a lot better than the ones over here. do. So we're going to whip through these in probably about 10 minutes and we'll have those all done. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and hammer them down just a little bit more right here at the edge, so we got a really nice flat solid surface area where our rivets are going in right there. And then we're going to actually cut off all of these excess tabs that we don't need. We're going to only leave about a 1/2 inch on each one of these, something like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish these up and then we will go ahead and cut them off. Alright guys, we've got the entire fender well completely tacked up now. Those things are solid, they are not going anywhere, and we got this underskin right here pushed up all the way up to the cut line there from front to back. Very, very nice. I also trimmed away this little part right here which was sticking out. This is where the rear bumper was previously bolted to. It was about right here. I shaved that away, of course, so that the tire has clearance through there. And then I went ahead and took the same bolt that I took out of that mount right there and just re-drilled it right up through the bracket, the plastic of the bumper, and the upper bracket as well. So it's the same screw. It's kind of a self-tapping screw, so I just put a little pilot hole through the bottom and just drilled right up in there, and that thing is solid, not going anywhere. So here it is. We have the hard part out of the way. Next part is super simple and a little fun, to be completely honest. I'm just going to go ahead and take my Sharpie marker here and I'm going to draw a line just above each one of these rivets here. And like I said, I'm just going to be going for about a 1/2 inch of width there, just enough so that there's the same amount of metal on both ends of the rivet there. So I'm going to take a black line and just mark it all here. Then we're going to trim off all of those little tabs that we don't need there. Doesn't have to be super exact. You're just looking to get rid of as much of this metal here as you can without compromising the surface area that your rivet is tacked into. Nice clean result here. The less metal here, the better, because when you lay your over fender over the top, you don't want any of these rivets or any of this folded metal to interfere with the over fender resting on top, like I was explaining earlier. So I'm actually going to go in after all this is cut down and I'm going to actually shave a lot of this down. I'm going to take my sanding block with a 60 grit sandpaper and I'm just going to sand down these rivets so that I take off the little mountain or the little high spot off of each one of these and flatten it down. Not so much that you're actually shaving through the rivet itself and taking the hat off. You don't want to do that, but just shave it down so it's flat, so there's a lot less possibility of your over fender interfering with the tops of the rivets here. Alright, so I have my line drawn out there. Hopefully you guys can see that. And just that black line all the way across the top there. It doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be super pretty or anything like that. Just something that's going to give you a guide to follow as you're coming along with your cutting wheel. And like I said, this is kind of a fun part, and the reason for that is because I will show you. It's not really that fun, but fun compared to the rest of the job. Alright, so I'm going to take my cutting wheel and I'm going to follow this black line as closely as I can. And I'm not looking to go all the way through these metal tabs here. I'm just looking to score them pretty good. So once you have them scored, you can actually bend the metal and just peel them off. Just make them go back and forth a couple of times and they'll come right off without any risk of you cutting down into your outer sheet metal here. So I'll show you right now what that looks like. First of all, I'm going to get my goggles on. My goggles and my gloves, if I can find them. This is my biggest problem. I set something down and I have no idea where I put it. It takes me like 10 minutes to find it. Anyways, let me grab my goggles and my gloves. I'll be right back. Alright, goggles on, gloves on, got my tool. Let's get started. Alright, we have finished our scoring. You can see I just took my blade and followed that black line all the way through. I did not cut through the tabs, through the metal. I just cut enough to score it there. And now here comes the fun part that I was talking about. At least it's fun for me. I don't know about you guys, but you can just bend this back and forth just like this. Make sure you're wearing gloves when you're doing this, guys. A couple of times, and It just makes a satisfying crunch and a satisfying sound. I don't know, to me. Just comes right off of there, see? Just like a little chip. Just gonna move right along. Take them right off. No damage to the outer layer whatsoever. If you try and just cut right through these things, you're going to cut right into that outer layer of sheet metal, and it's going to look just terrible. And you don't want to put any gashes all up in here. You're going to have to seal those and everything. So the less gashes, the less damage you do, the better. So you can see I'm just going along, doing a little twist action a little bit. It just has a satisfying feel to it. I don't know. Kind of relieves all the tension of having an extremely high-speed blade running in your hands, not knowing if it's the last days for your fingers or not. So anyways, this is the process. I'm just going to go ahead and finish up all of these, pulling off all these little tabs. This is what you're going for, something like that. And then we're going to sand all this down, do a little filing of the edges, hammer it down a little bit. You don't want any real little high spots, so you can see a few little high spots in there. We're just going to hammer that down so it's nice and flush as much as possible. Then we'll sand it all down. Like I said, shave down those rivets a little bit. And then we are ready to go for masking off the car here, and we're going to give this whole entire operation right here a good spray down with our galvanizing spray. We want the entire thing covered, all of the little cuts on the inside, everything we want to spray up in there, everything on the top and all that. So we're going to mask off a considerable amount of the body, pretty much the entire body here, because we got a lot to do with the galvanizing spray. And then we're going to let that dry, and then we'll go in with a primer over the top, and we will be good to go until we get in and do our welding. I've decided I'm not going to use any kind of epoxy or anything like that. I don't think it's going to be necessary because we're going to do a thorough job with the galvanizing spray and the primer, and it will last just until I get to doing the welding. And I plan on doing the welding ASAP. As soon as I get to moving into my new place and getting situated there, I'm going to get a welder, and I'm going to revisit this. But for now, this will do just fine. Whee! Alright, so I've gone ahead and done all my sanding. I've sanded everything down with my rough sandpaper and my sanding block. Get a little closer here so you can see, or maybe not. Let's zoom in here for you. So I just shaved off the very tops of those rivets there to give it a flat surface as opposed to a round surface. That will help to prevent any contact from the overfender when we leave the or lay the overfender up over the top there. So we are good to go. As you can see, I've also gone ahead and done all my masking. I've masked off everything. I do not want any of my primer and my galvanizing spray to get onto. You know, obviously we want to cover up all of this area here, as well as the plastic on the bumper and all that, and the tail light's very important. But I'm just going to be spraying right along this area that we just worked on, and like I said, underneath here real well. I was also careful to make sure I masked off all of my wheel hub and also my strut back there. I don't want anything getting on my strut back there. So we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and do my spraying now of the galvanizing and the primer. And this is what I'm using for the galvanizing spray. It's Rust-Oleum bright galvanizing compound. You can get this at like Lowe's or Home Depot or your local hardware store if you're not in the States, and it works really well. It's super corrosion resistance, so I use this on any metal that I cut that has the risk of corroding. I spray it down with this. It's dry to the touch in 15 minutes, and then I go ahead and hit it with a primer on top of that. Works fantastic. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and spray this down, and then I will give you a look at the entire project completed. I've completed all 4 corners at this point, so we are done, guys. We have cut the fenders. I'm satisfied with the result. It won't be long before I get back in here and do the welding, but this is going to hold for now, no problem. I may go back in and just fill up the underneath seams right here with some silicone after all, but I don't know. I don't foresee that there's going to be any real problem with any rain or moisture getting in there. There's not really any rain going on right now, and I certainly don't plan on running my car through any puddles. So I think it's going to be just fine for the time being, but I may just run some silicone in there just to seal up those underneath seams there so no water splashes up from the bottom of the tire. So that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope it helped if you guys are in the middle of trying to do something like this yourself. Of course, there's many ways of doing this. This is just the way that I was able to do it myself. Just take your time with it, don't rush through it, and be very careful. Be safe. You don't want to damage yourself, and you don't want to damage your car any more than You already have to in order to do something like this, but I'm going to go ahead and spray it down at this point, give you guys a little look at the whole thing, and that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any questions at all, concerns, comments, or whatever, let me know in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to help answer any questions or respond to any comments if you guys have any. I appreciate your feedback. Thanks for following, you guys. I will catch you guys on the next one. God bless.